Hi, everyone. This is Mike Lawrence from PowerSchool. I'm really excited to be joined today by Jeff Bradbury, who's the instructional coach for digital learning from Norwalk Public Schools. And he's here with Ralph Valenzisi, who's the Chief Technology Officer for the same district, Norwalk Public Schools. And we're going to talk a little bit about digital citizenship, cybersecurity, and all of the things that we are looking at right now. But here's the thing. We've been talking about this for a long time, haven't we, Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a new conversation, but it's just taking on a new light. And I think obviously in the situation that we're in, a lot of things have taken on a new light since March, and many that are once again pretty difficult issues to deal with. But in many ways, I'm hoping that from a digital learning standpoint, that we come out ahead of the game by the time we come through this whole post COVID pandemic, and we roll and become a more innovative as well as a more educated school system, at least for us, a school system, but a society around how important digital learning really is for our students, and how important it is for them to understand how to use these tools effectively in the workforce as well as in life.
That's a great goal. I agree. And towards that end, I imagine that thinking about going into the fall, you had a little bit more time than we all had in March. What changes have you made at Norwalk to protect students and staff and encourage good digital behaviors during the pandemic this fall?
Well, I think one of the things we spent a bit of time over the summer with is actually working with our teachers and making sure that they understood the tools that were out there. I mean, that's first and foremost. Secondly, something as simple as just setting expectations, for students, making sure that they really understand, like, how do you act online, and giving them concrete examples of those for students, for teachers. And we also had to make sure with remote learning with parents, making sure that they actually are part of the process. So we tried to make sure we incorporated all of those pieces. And I know Jeff will talk in a few minutes more about what we've been doing with our parent university and how we've been moving forward with trying to continually educate our parents. One of the things we know that will happen as soon as we get out of this pandemic is that this will not go away from the district. So this is one of those items where we've realized that it's necessary. We, and as we've seen a core group of parents really kind of like congregate to this, saying that they really want this, and that it's very useful, that we don't want to see that disappear at the end of this pandemic. We're going to make sure that that kind of gets incorporated into the way that we operate as a whole moving forward.
Hopefully that could be a silver lining as we move out of this pandemic. So towards that point, Jeff, you work directly with educators quite often in your role as instructional coach, and there's always limited time. I imagine you have to condense down the wisdom to really small groups of ideas or tips or tricks. What would be 2 tips for educators that you might be share or that you've been sharing so far for this pandemic?
Sure. I think one of the first things that I talk to all of our educators about is staying organized, knowing what's around, knowing what's out there, and just having a plan for what happens when and what happens if something ends up happening. That's something that we talk about with our tech coaches, and that's something that we've been talking about in professional learning. The other thing I think is important is knowing how to really be an educator in today's classrooms, right? A couple years ago, we were talking about teaching from the back of the classroom, making sure that you can see those screens, walk around the rooms, make sure that you're interacting with all of those students. It's not the case right now. Some of your students aren't even in the same room, even in the same building that you're in. So knowing how to have a plan that's organized for what happens when is I think, vital. But at the same time, having the right professional development, professional learning for how to educate in a hybrid classroom is, I think, number 1 and number 2 for right there.
No, that's a great point, and important things to think about. It's often the things that you don't really think about is organization. So I think that's a great point. And you mentioned, Ralph mentioned earlier, Parent University. Can you talk a little bit about the tips and the resources that you've been providing to parents? And if you had to do the same thing and provide just 2 tips, what 2 tips would you provide for your parents?
Sure. Parent University is something that we at the district are really, really excited about. It actually came out of an idea that one of our principals had of what would happen if we just did a couple classes for our parents of that particular school. And the idea was great. And next thing you know, we're actually building out an entire district plan to run a parent university. So our website is NPS for Norwalk Public Schools, npsparentuniversity.org. And we've been running both synchronous and asynchronous learning for parents. We do workshops in the afternoons when parents are getting kids ready to go. And on top of all of that, we've got some great resources from partners. We partner with Common Sense Education. We partner with Securely. We're partnering with other great companies. But also in there, we're enacting not only just our staff members here, like our tech coaches and our teachers, but we're also going to be enacting our community. So that way it is truly a whole child approach, but it's really a whole community approach where community is going to be teaching community all of these different skills to help raise Norwalk Public Schools as a whole.
That's fabulous. I know as a parent myself, that's always appreciated, that level of communication, that level of support, helping explain some of the reasons behind the decisions. That is absolutely key. And I'm hoping selfishly that PowerSchool becomes one of your partners on that. I know we've talked about how can we help you for that parent university. Are there any other thoughts that you guys have really around the idea of digital citizenship, cybersecurity? I saw an article today about this crazy ransomware attack that's just been discovered, and they're warning teachers to be careful when they receive assignments from parents they don't recognize because it could potentially launch a ransomware attack. I mean, it just seems crazy. Any final thoughts on things like that, or some of the creative approaches we're starting to hear from the bad guys in this equation?
Well, I think that, it's interesting because we actually are doing a workshop with Securely around, safe websites for students to go to later on tonight for our parents on Parent University. But if we were going to talk about teachers, and then I'll mention a comment about parents, teacher-wise, specifically with what you were talking about with the ransomware issue. Last year, we really started a campaign with our teachers with understanding what malware is, really what phishing software is and so forth, to the point where we actually do tests on a regular basis, where we will send out our own phishing software and see who bites. And then if they bite a certain amount of times, we make sure that they kind of get some classes and we offer them some extra training around that. We just want to make sure that we're actually helping them not only within school, but with their own life skills that we really feel like it's important. So it's not punitive in any way, shape, or form, but it's something that we just feel like is important to educate our teachers in doing this. What's funny is how quickly the people biting on these types of phishing emails has dropped, because once there's that awareness and you communicate with people about stuff like this, they understand, and they really do work towards the idea of actually getting better at it, and they know it's also helping them. So I think it's been a positive overall. From the area of parents, if there's one thing that I could say that is really important to do in this environment with for parents to do with their children, is talk to them. We are all going to, like I said, the bad guys are going to keep coming up with different ways of approaching students, whether it's online, offline, whatever it may be. But if there is an open era of communication on what students are doing online as well as offline, but especially online, whether it's safety, whether it's them having anxiety or bullying or any of those other items, the way that parents can know about that is they're not going to understand all the technology at all times, but they do understand what their children are saying. So it's important to be talking to them on a regular basis.
And I think, to echo what Ralph is saying, having that communication with your kids is probably the most important thing. Mike, I'm the proud father of first grade triplets, and they are every single day on their Chromebooks doing stuff, having, I always say it starts with innocence, right? Like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into until you're there. So having those conversations with those kids of all ages. One of the things that I'm extremely proud of with our Parent University is that we do break it down. We're doing a session on digital citizenship for first through third grade students. And we're breaking it down so that way parents of that age can actually start to have those conversations and make sure that things don't happen this year, next year, 3 or 4 years down the road. It's never too early to start talking about these things.
That's fabulous. And who would have thought that education, communication, and planning might be the keys to moving through this? I really like that idea about the test too. And I've experienced that myself, and I succumbed to it once. And I was like, I was so glad to find out that it was a test. It was internal, but it could have been really a bad guide. So better to have that be your own internal tests than to have it be, an actual attack. So kudos to you and your team for planning that far ahead and preparing and providing that education that's not punitive. That's fabulous. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know you guys are super busy and you're doing amazing work. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and helping us share it out to the world. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for everything.
Thanks, Mike.